6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. 7.6 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of science. This is
What is going on, everybody? Conley here with the Science Nights in the morning. We have all the professors here, Dr. Sean Graham, Dr. Anirbahn Bhattacharjee, and Dr. Thomas Shiller. I'm your host, Conley Rasor, and we have a very special guest today. Professor at Sullivan State University, Dr. Martin Terry is here, and we're going to be talking about the mysterious plant Peyote. Dr. Terry, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
It's a gorgeous. It's been a gorgeous fall so far, and the trees are starting to change. The fall colors are starting to come out.
Amazing.
And man, just everything around this area is just absolutely gorgeous. And
sure.
oh yeah, and we thank you for coming in too. By the way,
My pleasure.
okay. Well, we're gonna go ahead and start out. Dr. Sean Graham, myself, I'm somewhat familiar with peyote. I'm somewhat familiar with a lot of substances, actually. But, that's another time, another place. You're not familiar with peyote.
No.
So do you have some questions for Dr. Terry about this mysterious cactus and why it is so iconic?
So, hold on. This episode, I'm assuming, we are going to talk about peyote, right?
Peyote.
See, excellent. Neither have I. I have no idea.
Oh, you have no?
Yes.
So, all right.
Anirbahn has no familiarity with the plant.
Yes.
And
I know
when we say familiarity, we've got air quotes up.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know the plant peyote, but otherwise I have no idea how it looks like or what it like blossoms. Or,
Yeah.
So,
for people like us, rubes, who have no idea, right? Some people, they probably heard of peyote, but what the hell is it?
Okay, first of all, it's a plant.
Yeah.
And it's a plant that thrives in the desert. Hence, we see it in West Texas, but also we see it down in South Texas, close to the Rio Grande, where the days get hot, the nights not too cold, and the soil is full of calcium, which they love. So it does real well down there. In fact, most of the actual peyote harvesting that goes on these days for the religious purposes comes from South Texas.
Okay. And
so is that means does peyote Texas plant, or it doesn't appear in Mexico at all then?
It does. There are several species in Mexico. On this side of the Rio Grande, we just talk about the one species, which is Lophophora williamsii.
Now, do they also call peyote the nurse plant or the nursing plant? Have you heard of that name?
You're getting close.
Okay.
Something that is referred to as a nurse plant is generally a large plant that, in the case of peyote, which is growing down here on the floor of the desert under this nice umbrella of a shade-producing plant. That's what makes it work.
I see.
The partial shade is exactly what peyote likes the best. It doesn't like full sun without end, and it doesn't like too much rain. They can drown when either too much rain or a hurricane coming in off the Gulf.
So I guess that's one of the reasons you can take Sahara and Arabian deserts out of the way, because it's only sand dunes. You won't get any rocky structures and stuff like that.
Peyote would just shrivel up to nothing in the Sahara.
Yeah, it needs our desert's actually pretty lush from a world perspective.
Yeah.
And you have these situations where you got plants kind of growing under another plant and struggling, and a nurse plant kind of helping another plant out. Doesn't even know it's helping it, but more specifically, it's a special kind of plant. The kind of plants that we typically associate with the desert. It's a cactus, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's a weird cactus. Because most people, when they think of cactus, they think of a plant with spines all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the peyote cactus it has hairs, little tufts of hairs where there would be spines on other cacti. It doesn't need spines. It defends itself by having alkaloids, which when any mammal, say, eats the top of the peyote plant, which is full of the alkaloids, it's likely to not be very happy with the result.
Yeah, it produces a fairly bitter taste, right?
Very bitter, exactly.
And so before to go for people, we all know what a cacti looks like usually on a general scale, what a cacti would look like. So what would separate a cacti from like a normal shrub or something like that, like a rose?
Like a succulent, maybe?
Yeah, succulent, or like even a rose bush. Like, let's say, what would separate a cacti from them? And this is because somebody who is not into botany, and I do not know what exactly
what makes a cactus a cactus?
Yeah, because you know, because I've always studied. Okay, this is in desert, you get cacti or cactus, and it looks like this. But what would you botanically? Where would be the
That's
classification?
a good question. Yeah.
Okay. What has happened over many millennia is that what used to be, in the evolutionary scale, what used to be leaves have been reduced to things we call spines. And again, here we take some. If the plant were to put out a whole lot of leaves, then the herbivores would come along and just eat it down to nothing. Mm-hmm. But they don't do that so easily when you have spines sticking out at all angles from the skin of a cactus.
Mm. Okay, so that's where we break up.
Most of the cactus you're looking at is actually part of the stem, right? And then the little spines are all that's left of what formerly would have been leaves. And I guess the kind of the most primitive or the most ancestral cacti actually still have leaves.
Yes, indeed they do.
Yeah, but they don't look much like cacti because of that.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know roughly how old Peyote is? Like the particular species that we're talking about, you called it
Williamsii, like Williams, with two eyes on the end.
Yeah. Okay, great. Williamsii.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know roughly how old that is?
Are you talking in evolutionary terms?
In evolution, the unifying theory of biology terms. That's what we call evolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's put it this way. A typical cactus. I'd like to talk about the structure.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think this will get where we want to go.
Okay.
A whole peyote plant, which you have to dig up to get it out without tearing it up, it is basically the size and shape of an ice cream cone. Mm-hmm. The part that would be, the ice cream sticking out of the top of the cone, that is basically the top of the plant, and that's the only part of the plant that gets direct sunlight. Mm. The rest of the plant is underground. So you go now to beneath that nice soft ice cream cone thing we're talking about, which really we would call a crown. We would call it a crown of the plant. You go below ground level, and suddenly everything changes. There's no longer this nice soft pudgy ice cream cone like thing on the top of the plant. As you go underground, immediately everything gets hard. Mm. And what you'll find is that herbivores will not touch that stuff. They don't even like the stuff that's sticking out of the cone on top, the so-called ice cream part.
Yeah.
But they even less like the part below the ground. It's got nothing in it for them, apparently. Mm. And we've actually measured the mescaline content of the top of the plant versus the sort of conical part of the plant going down into the ground. And finally, when you get far enough down, you get true root. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that the root begins just below the surface of the ground.
Yeah.
Not so. That's that tissue going down is actually you would have to call it a subterranean stem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow.
And it will actually produce little buds underground. Mm. In other words, if you let's do the scenario.
Okay.
You're a peyote harvester, a peyotero, and you see a nice big fat crown of a peyote plant on the ground. So you take out your machete and you cut it off at ground level, mm-hmm. which gives you the part that gives you. Let's call it 90% of the alkaloid is in that little hemispherical top of the plant.
Right.
So you cut that off and take it to sell it to your local peyotero who sells it to people who can use it legally in the Native American church.
Sure.
Okay. But going down from where you cut, you're talking now about a tough stem tissue. People don't believe that. They think that's got to be root because it's below the aerial part of the plant. But no, it's not. It's really a kind of subterranean stem.
Yeah.
And it will, if you cut off the top, if the peyote gets to the top of the plant, come back to that same plant in a year's time, and you'll see already it's begun to put out little tiny crowns, miniature crowns coming out from that underground part of the stem.
In just a year, huh?
In just a year.
Wow.
Now, they're tiny by that time. You're
Yeah.
talking dime size max.
Uh-huh.
But it can put out several of them at one time from that subterranean portion of the stem.
Wow.
And then you keep going all the way down to the bottom of the plant. You get actually the true root of the plant, which is very small.
Yeah.
It may have just a couple of little, hair-like roots sticking out to gather what they can.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it's very few people understand the anatomy of that plant.
Yeah. That's and that must have taken, thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of years to kind of, find its own way into that particular structure, right?
Could well be, yes.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. Wow, that's
And,
amazing.
There's some other, the other cactus, there's another cactus that lives around here, the night blooming cereus, that has a huge underground structure.
Yes.
And it just puts up like a foot long little stem
Right.
and an enormous flower
Yes,
once a year.
Once a year. Exactly. You got it.
At nighttime, right?
Yes.
And it's got that underground structure. Is that also a huge underground stem, or is that some sort of a tuber? Or
It's really a tuber.
is it? Yeah. So it's a storage structure. Yeah.
Which, you
You're kind of
that's
splitting
a hard one
hairs.
to
Yeah.
say, is it stem or is it root?
Yeah. Same kind of a similar adaptation though. You're gonna put all your money underground if you live in the desert.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is this like a normal cacti thing where you have a lot of the structure underneath the ground?
No, that's not normal. Most 90-something% of the species of cacti will have most of their, how should we say, most of their weight certainly above ground, and they're busy. Those nice pads of prickly pear plants. Every bit of that surface is being used to absorb photosynthesis. Absorb sunlight and turn it into edible products or digestible products, let's say.
For the plant.
Yes.
Well, all right. Well, this is a good time to kind of get into a little of your background. We have about 7 minutes left. What really inspired you? What made you so intrigued about these beautiful plants and so mysterious as well?
Well, I just noticed when I was in my, let's say, 6 to 8 years old, I noticed that cacti were different from other plants.
Yeah.
They were missing some essential structures, what I thought were essential structures.
Yeah.
And so I just, I dug some up and put them in the garden at my parents' house so I could just sort of keep an eye on them. And I figured they taught me a lot about the extremes that nature can go to make a living.
To survive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's really magical about this area out here in the high desert is whenever you go, and I'm sure you have noticed, Sean, as well, and I'm sure you have too, Dr. Terry. You haven't been to Big Bend yet?
Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, okay. Well, then you may have noticed too. Right before it rains, before the first drop hits, you look around, something magical it happens. All the succulents start. It's almost like they're coming out to like embrace what's about to come, and the plants just kind of there's a sense in the air, a magical sense that everything's getting ready to absorb every single drop of life that falls from the sky. Have you experienced something like that?
I have, yes. It's quite unique. People who don't live in a desert won't believe that,
Right? Yeah. And Neil Sperry, he does a show on lawn and gardening, and I was telling him about that, and he's very well familiar. We have Dr. Thomas Shiller sneaking in the studio right now. He's trying to be very quiet. That's good.
He would have made it if you hadn't. Dr. Terry, where did you grow up? Where you were digging up cacti and putting them in your home garden?
West University Place, Houston, Texas.
Okay, Houston.
Practically downtown.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So apparently this place attracted you because all of the the unique plants out here that we have. All the
Oh,
unique
absolutely.
cactus.
This is it's so different from Houston. It's unspeakable.
Oh, tell me about it. You can see the sky out here, so that's one good thing. All right, well, we got about 5 minutes. Dr. Thomas Shiller is here in the house with us. How's it going, Dr. Thomas Shiller?
So I have a couple of funny cactus stories. The first one really isn't that funny for me, but everyone else who I tell this to seems to think it's pretty funny. But I like going mountain biking out on our trail system behind Sul Ross. And this is probably close to a year ago now. I was up there riding my bike, and I ended up wiping out, and I went butt first into a nopal cactus.
Ooh.
Which is always a big nightmare that you have. Any people who've been out hiking or in the field at all, you always wonder what it'd be like to just pitch into a cactus, and I actually did it.
Yeah.
So I got to study a nopal cactus from face to face, or butt to cactus.
Yeah.
But in terms of peyote, now this isn't the kind of story that you're going to think it is. I always find it interesting when I'm out walking around in the field in really remote areas. You find these kind of habitations, these abandoned Native American sites, and especially close to the river. I don't know if this has been your experience, Martin, but you start finding little clusters of peyote, and you can tell they've been tended to, like they've been cultivated. They have little rock structures built around them, obviously showing some great importance to the native people. And I actually went out with an archaeologist one time and asked him about it because we stumbled across one of these sites. And they actually did cultivate that peyote. They grew it in these kind of, I don't know if they would be like sacred spots, but places where they did peyote rituals. And always found that really interesting. But they're easy to miss, I'm sure y'all have, I kind of missed out on what y'all were talking about the first part of the show, but they're tiny little cacti, and they almost look like rocks. They're really, really difficult to spot.
Little buttons.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Martin, that's the idea, right? These are
Absolutely.
we would consider these rock mimic plants, and they're not the only rock mimic. Well, they're not even the only rock mimic cacti we have in the area. Right. We have more than one species that mimics rocks.
Yep.
And then worldwide, we've got totally unrelated plants, right? In the southern deserts of Africa, from a completely different family of plants. It's also a family of plants. It's a succulent family. I don't even. What is it? What are those? Are they portulacas or something like that?
Portulacas are certainly over there.
Yeah, or the Azoaceae. I can never keep them straight. But there's little rock pebble mimic plants in Namibia, places like that look a lot like peyote. And it's a great example of convergent evolution, where you got the similar kind of habitats, similar need to disguise themselves, and so they look just like rocks, and they're supposed to. They're rock mimics.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing that a plant would develop a adaptation like that, because there's rock mimic lizards and things like that, and that makes sense. But plants, that's crazy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, you know what? Thomas's story kind of segues into the topic that we're going to go in after the break. I can't wait for this, because we're going to talk about some of the mysticism that surrounds this really majestic plant, and talk about maybe some of the rituals, some of the religions that are around this, and maybe some of our own experiences. How about that? All right. Well, we'll see y'all after the break. Thomas just gave us a little giggle there. So. All right, what's up, everybody? We are back, Science Nights in the Morning, and special guest Dr. Martin Terry. We're talking about peyote today, and we're going to be talking in this segment a little bit about the religion that is behind this plant, some of the rituals, and the mysticism that kind of has really intrigued our culture with what this plant does on, what would you say, psychedelic level, possibly?
You could say that.
So there's a good, simple kind of first question is, what exactly does peyote do to your body when it's consumed? Because that's the first thing people are going to think about when they listen to the show, is because you associate peyote with its kind of psychedelic or psychotropic effects, right?
A lot of people do. If you pose that question to a Native American member of the Native American Church, he won't admit that anything like that is happening. It's just a part of the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, everybody knows that when you sit around in a circle in a teepee with the fire in the middle and the drums going at it, what happens to be a frequency that resonates with some things going on in the human brain. All that stuff they don't want to talk about. The natives, the members of the church, don't want to stress that. They want to quietly, eat a mouthful of peyote, listening to the drums, listening to the singing, pass the peyote along to the next person. In other words, it's there's not much to make a big deal out of. With most of the tribes I know, anyway, the way they handle their ceremonies, it's another kind of church, really. And they have their own. Each tribe has its own unique rituals. Interestingly, if you follow them back, and we don't know how much time we're talking about here, but it seems that all the Plains tribes of Native Americans have a story about the origin of how they came to use peyote. And the story in every one of those tribes has a common sort of origin. And it goes like this. There was a woman, it's always a woman, never a man, who's out in the desert, and she gets lost. She doesn't know how to find her way back to the tribe. And finally, she just falls down in exhaustion and goes to sleep. When she wakes up, she realizes that she's sleeping in the shade of a bush. And right next to her, when she wakes up, the first thing she sees under that bush is this little plant growing. And the plant is always described as something that turns out to be peyote. And a voice tells the young woman to eat the plant. So she does. She puts a piece in her mouth and chews it up. And the result is that it invigorates her, and she is able then to get up with her full strength, and she knows exactly how to go to get back to the tribe. That little vignette of a story is part of the explanation, the historical explanation that the Native American church members will give you if you ask them, why do you guys do this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has nothing to do with an understanding of the physiological effects. It's just part of the ritual relating to that story.
They really don't want to hear about mescaline.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because it seems like the story is basically peyote helps the person get direction to the place that person wants to go to, like an inner journey. That's why you take it, not because of anything else.
Exactly.
And is that the modern ritual? Is that kind of what's going on?
The modern ritual has grown, has developed in many ways. And now what goes on in the modern ceremony is, okay, first of all, the afternoon is spent with these very long poles and this big piece of canvas putting up the teepee. All the poles crossing as they come out of the hole in the top of the teepee. Then at sundown, that's when things begin to happen. Everybody's just sort of socializing and talking before, but when the sun goes down, everybody who's going to be involved in the ceremony finds their way to a seat inside the conical teepee and around the outside. So they're all seated around the outside. The so-called roadman who leads the meeting, who really calls the shots in the meeting, is given a special place up in the center against the teepee, and everybody pays attention to him. And even if you want to go to the bathroom, you catch his eye, and he'll look around and be sure that you're not going to cross with somebody praying, and he'll say, "Go ahead." And when you come back in again, people will be assured that you find your right place, but without disturbing anybody else's, prayer time. The music. The music is really important in the modern ceremony. and presumably always has been. But there are two types of drums, or rather, I should say, there's the really interesting one to me is the water drum, which is a piece of deer hide that's been tanned, and it's just then it's soaked in water and stretched over this how would you call it, a metal tub, and that produces a sound. It's something like boom, 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 which can be heard at least a mile away, sometimes more. So you've got that music going on, and then you've got somebody else who's got a gourd rattle, and it's interesting. It's being shaken at the same frequency as something going on in your central nervous system. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the term for that, but it's very clear that the rattle and the drum and mainly those two elements keep the rhythm going and provide some sort of an input to the central nervous system. Everybody in that TP is very much aware of the rhythms of the drums. And then, we might as well talk about peyote since we're talking about peyote.
Well, no, but that's interesting. I mean, it seems like they're putting themselves in an environment to where they can resonate with this ancient wisdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the metabolism merges with custom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then at some point, the roadman, the guy who's running the show, who's sort of telling people what to do when, he nods that it's time for the peyote to be passed around. And so the peyote can be in the form of just the tops of the plant, which are, remember, very soft and juicy, would be cut up into pieces and put in a jar, and that would happen. Let's say you've got an ordinary 30-person ceremony going on. There would probably be 50 to 60 pieces of peyote in this jar, which they would pass around, and each person would take his a piece of it, put it in his mouth, and some will just hold it there and let the mescaline absorb across the mucous membranes of the mouth. Others will want to chew it up and swallow it. Eventually, that's what will happen to all of them. It all gets ingested, and then from there on, the show is up to the plant. But it's the mixture of the plant and the person who eats the plant. The two are so closely interwoven that it's hard to tell, who's in charge here. Is it the plant or is it the human?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You say that, but you first let it slip. You said, then it's up to the plant. And that's interesting because you're talking about a merger, but I think the plant's really taking the wheel here, right?
Definitely.
And it kind of, when you say that, do you mean each plant's going to be kind of different in the amount of mescaline that's present?
I don't think that's certainly the people in that tent, in that teepee, would not want to describe it.
Of course. It's just a different experience, but do you think it's tied to that?
Effect.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a very positive thing that's going on.
Uh-huh.
But the guys who have been doing this, all their lives, it's just part of their ritual.
Yeah, it's their religion.
They're probably experiencing the same thing that I do or you would, but they make no show whatsoever.
Yeah. And so their attitude and the way they see it and the way they're they're bringing something to the table too. So there's where the merger would be, because
exactly.
Some, loose cannon like me out in the desert finds this plant and sticks it in his mouth, right? He's got nothing to prep him, and it could be bedlam. It could be nuts.
It could indeed.
But if it's this controlled environment, they're coming at it with this attitude and they're calm, their chemistry, and like you said, their physiology kind of merges with the music, then it can be a religious experience.
Absolutely.
So that's, I guess, a warning to folks out there who might be trying to do this recreationally, right? That's where, have you heard of like super bad experiences with it being taken recreationally?
Actually, I've never witnessed or even heard of that. And I think it's because if it were to happen, if a person were to be, made nauseous or something, he would just be directed to go out and.
Oh, right. So that could happen in the tent.
Yes.
That somebody
it definitely can.
yeah, they get nauseous, because that's all I've heard is that it causes people to vomit a lot.
Yes.
But then it would be.
Those really are people who are pretty naive to the plant.
I see. Yeah.
They learn to overcome that urge to vomit.
Oh wow.
And it just becomes part of the ceremony, part of the sensation.
Has there been some accounts of a spiritual guide that is personification of the plant that comes to people in hallucinogens? I personally have experience with peyote and also salvia and a few other things, but I have heard of accounts, and I've actually seen with my own, I guess, third eye, you could say, these spiritual guides that come in and guide you, and all of the time they were a woman, almost.
Yes,
you have.
Well, I haven't personally experienced that.
Okay,
but I have heard people talk about it. It's real.
It is real. So people do experience that, and then they have these spiritual guides that basically take them through this ancient wisdom that is communicated through this plant. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So you don't recall what you saw or you experienced?
Not as anything abnormal.
Okay.
I can tell you that the fire had a very special sort of visual effect if you just stared at the fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding what happens when you take peyote, because I've heard like what Sean was
mentioning.
mentioning.
So you've never tried it?
No. And this is the reason why. Well, one reason is because I'm a control freak, and I don't like taking things where I lose control. I don't think it would be pleasant for me, but that would just be my experience. But
it says 6 cans of empty cores in the back of your trunk. Okay,
it takes him 24 to lose control.
I would never.
And he's still pretty smooth even after 24.
Okay,
even after 60 beers.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, the few different kind of experiences that I've heard other people speak about is like what Sean was talking about. Some people, I guess people who are not trained to do the full ritual, or they don't have their guide, their roadman to kind of guide them through the ritual. I've heard of people getting violently ill,
sure,
and having like terrifying visions. And I'm talking about like goobers who go out in the desert and pick up a piece just to experience it. They think it's going to be like some sort of psychotropic mushroom or something, and they have a terrible experience.
Yeah.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, from what I've heard, if you do participate in the full ceremony, the ritual where it's guided, and I suspect that the drum beat all has something to do with maybe slowing down your heart rate, getting you calm and relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard totally different experiences from that, positive ones.
Yeah. Well, the time that I tried it, and you have to be in a really stable mental state. I would recommend, if anybody do try it recreational, to like be part of the church and actually do it that way, and do it, of course, legally. But with my particular experience, I put myself in a place to where I was very accepting of this plant and letting go of my own ego and my own self. And what I experienced on it was I basically literally saw the sun just travel constantly so fast. I saw the trees just constantly growing and just dying and growing and dying. Mm-hmm. And I was in Villanueva State Park during this in New Mexico. And I literally saw the rocks slowly move like water. It was like time was going by. I mean, we're talking decades, not even
geological
decades, like geological time, more than decades a second. Mm-hmm. And you saw the whole world as a living organism that was, I mean, just as alive as you are. And you have this really deep appreciation, religious experience. And you feel so interconnected with everything around you. And it's just so valuable. And the beauty of it is you don't forget about it. It stays with you. And that's why there's a lot of research going on right now. We're on the cusp of how these psychotropic plants can actually aid people in their own mental health. And I'm all for it personally. Hopefully we can talk our senators and lawmakers into kind of waking up a little bit, but that's just me.
So Is
Okay.
that something that is part of the ritual? Once everyone comes down off of the experience, do they share their own personal experiences, or is it kind of your personal thing that you keep with you that you don't share with other people?
I think the latter.
Okay.
Everyone in a teepee has their own experience, and when the sun comes up and everybody files out to socialize, they talk about trivial social stuff.
Mhm.
They don't talk about what happened in the teepee.
Because it's understandable, because you are on a very personal journey. You don't want to talk about it to somebody else. You are there for your own direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you want to talk to somebody else because they won't know what you're talking about.
Did you find this source of direction from your experiences? Did you get from it what the ritual was intended for you?
I believe that I did. Yeah.
Can you share anything about that, or is it too personal? It's okay.
Yeah. I mean,
It's so hard to draw the line between perceptions of things that are happening in your immediate environment, like the fire. The fire in the center of the teepee is incredibly attractive, incredibly. What's the word? Come on.
immaculate.
Entrancing, or
Entrancing is a perfectly good word. Yeah. You almost yourself combines with the fire.
Mhm.
It's that much concentration. Wow.
Everything is one. Well, we're reaching our final segment here in a little bit, and that this is very powerful. This is a very powerful ritual, and it's a blessing to even be able to experience things like that in order to change our perception in a positive way compared to other very harmful man-made substances out there. So I do agree with that 100%. After the break, perhaps we can talk a little bit more about conservation of this particular species of plant. Williamsii. I'm going to get it right one of these days, but we'll catch up right after the break.
Hey, everybody. Science Nights in the Morning. We're back. We're talking to Dr. Martin Terry about an awesome subject, peyote. And I just want to mention real quick that, we've been talking about these amazing uses and experiences that people have had with this plant. And I always love being kind of the party pooper and pointing out that, it's not like this plant developed mescaline for our enjoyment, right? The whole point for this plant is to keep things from eating it, right?
Right.
And I think I asked you this question before, Martin, when we were in a graduate seminar or something like that. Is there anything that does eat peyote?
Not very much.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the one experiment that I did, I took the top of a peyote plant and put it on a slab of limestone, where it was close to where I could look, keep an eye on it. And that was in the afternoon. I came back the next morning, and the cut-off top of the peyote button had been moved about, let's say, a foot, and there was a little sort of pie slice piece taken out of it and spat out again.
Yeah.
So it's built up a good defense mechanism.
Javelinas don't like peyote, is what I deduce from that.
Very
and
nice.
they'll eat anything.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
didn't you tell me though? Because usually it's with something like this, there's always some sort of an arms race where something can develop an enzyme that can detoxify it, and it's going to be like a caterpillar or something like that. Caterpillars can feed on incredibly toxic plants, and they'll just evolve defense mechanisms and enzymes to detoxify it. Did you mention to me that there was like a snail species or something like that?
There
that
is a
grazes on them?
snail species that does eat the flesh, the above ground part of the peyote plant, and apparently does quite well with it. That's
And I hear they're really fun to party with.
Does the flesh part have mescaline in it?
Yes.
Oh,
They
it
eat the
does.
top of the plant that has the most mescaline.
Yeah,
After
goes
a
and
while.
hangs out with Jim Morrison.
Sweet.
So-
Oh yeah.
So is there anything this is like that is not people don't eat, like animals don't eat it, insects don't eat it.
Yeah,
Is there anything like, out there?
just the snail, and that's often the way it is.
No, I'm just talking not just peyote. I'm talking about like basically that if you take this entire earth, right? You take. Is there anything like
Anything that doesn't eat something?
I mean, no.
It's a big question.
Yes,
A comparable plant that
Millipedes. Millipedes are invincible.
so nobody eats millipedes.
There's basically nothing eats millipedes, but they're toxic. Not super toxic, but they're like you see them crawling everywhere, and they're certainly not like getting munched on left and right.
And here's the thing: millipedes are the ones which has the pincers on them. Like
No, they're not the ones that are venomous. They're poisonous. quote unquote,
poison, but the centipedes are the one which
they're
hunts.
harmless
Okay,
to
yeah.
handle, but you
Yeah.
would want to eat one. This is a successful plant because of its defense. It spread everywhere in the Chihuahuan Desert, and they were formerly common, but not so much anymore. Right? The peyote.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
In South Texas, where the populations are the largest traditionally,
Uh-huh.
that's where the Native American church people from all over the continent have traditionally gone to harvest their year's supply of peyote for their ceremonies. But what was your question again?
In this area, the Trans-Pecos, I think I read a paper recently. Somebody did some surveys in the Big Bend National Park and said it's gone. It's been extirpated from Big Bend National Park from people going and collecting, over harvesting the peyote.
Because they miscollect it. That's the thing. Some of them go and they get the roots instead of just taking,
Right.
You called it a peyotal? Or who's the licensed person?
Peyotero.
Peyotero.
Yeah, one who does peyote, literally.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought there had to be somebody that was licensed. And,
There is.
Okay.
They're DEA licensed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So those are really the only ones that are supposed to be harvesting this stuff.
But for since the '60s, right, people have been going out looking for these guys
Yeah,
Yeah.
in
and
fact,
digging them up, right?
due to some 1994 legislation that Congress passed,
Mhm.
if you're a card-carrying Native American and you have at least 50% Indian blood, you can legally ingest peyote.
Oh,
Yeah.
the harvesting of this, if it's harvested by an amateur and they take the root, stem, and all, I mean, that plant's never growing back. And if they only take the tops, you said earlier, it could start growing back within a year and almost be full-fledged by, around 3 to 5 years? Something like that.
Okay, let me try to explain what happens.
Okay.
The peyotero harvesting the plant for sale will cut off by taking his machete and just basically going at ground level,
Uh-huh.
taking the entire soft green mescaline-containing top.
Sure.
That would go into the peyotero's bag. Okay, then what happens to that plant that has been beheaded?
Sure.
Well, first of all, it forms a sort of a scab on top of the wound,
Mhm.
just so it doesn't lose a lot of water. So when the peyotero takes the top of the plant,
Uh-huh.
he leaves the subterranean stem,
Sure.
which is, you could say, the part below the ice cream cone,
Mhm.
and that is actually a lot of people want to call it root, but it's actually stem tissue.
Yeah. And that allows it to regenerate itself?
That allows it to regenerate. So if you keep watching that thing, go dig it up and take a look at it every month or so, you'll see that, there's these little buds coming out of that subterranean stem.
Yeah.
And eventually they break the surface. Photosynthesis.
There we go.
And then from then on, it's
Life
real
is born
easy.
again.
It's
Yeah.
easy for the plant after that.
Oh, that's
To
great.
regenerate.
So would you say harvesting, if done properly, is kind of good for the plant?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's
Yes.
great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, but doing it properly and not going out and
Yeah.
abusing the privilege, right? So,
Exactly.
that's very interesting.
And
so-
even if everybody plays by the rules, we're still running out of peyote. It's becoming scarcer every year.
Really?
Yeah, there's just not. There are too many of us and not enough of the peyote plants.
Yeah, you imagine if there were just people everywhere beheading them all the time. Yeah, it's great they come back, but if 10,000 people do that
Exactly.
throughout the
That's
desert,
our problem. That's what we face now.
they won't be able to sprout quickly enough to replenish the population.
Right.
And yeah, so it is it probably should be. I mean, it's protected in a way because nobody except for Native Americans are supposed to possess it, and you can get some jail time for it. So that's a pretty good protection. Hey, that's better protection than a lot of endangered species have. Honestly.
So quickly going on. So you said there are some peyotes in Mexico, right?
Yes.
Are they running out there also? Like I'm just saying,
They are.
They're running out there also. Okay.
Yes.
Is there like peyote? Because I don't know. So is there like peyote farms where they like actual like where you can have a farming kind of thing for
There
peyote?
should be.
Okay.
And up to now, there are no such.
Is
farms.
there like a regulation or something?
There was a regulation. There was a regulation in the United States, at least in the state of Texas, that cultivation of peyote was illegal. But that has now been done away with, and the federal government has sort of stepped in and is taking charge of the harvesting and sale of peyote buttons. I see that as a good thing.
Okay. Yeah. I was just.
And there is a website, cactusconservation.org. And you're the co-founder of this?
Cactus Conservation Institute. I'm one of the founders of it.
Oh, you're one of the founders of it. Okay. And if people want to get more information on the conservation of various cactus of any type, not just limited to peyote, they can go to cactusconservation.org and find a lot of information on that. So,
well, thanks so much for being here, Martin Terry. This is a great discussion. I appreciate you coming out for it, and just amazing stuff. And we'll hope to see you guys again. Join us next week. I'm sure we'll have another great show, Science Nights in the Morning. We'll see you next Saturday.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. You can also listen every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BigBenRadio.com. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K, and we'll see you next time.